Hello everybody, Dark Skeleton here, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing all of the new Hearthstone cards coming out in Kobolds and Catacombs up to today's date, which is November 23rd, I guess. So right now they've got about 30 cards here or something like that. So we're going to go through these, and I'm going to calmly evaluate these. Sometimes I've overblown a couple cards, I mean, who doesn't? Yeah, hopefully we can get a good idea of the power level of each of these cards. So alphabetical order for all the cards that are currently out or currently announced. Starting with Alanf, which is the new Mage Legendary weapon. So this is a 6 mana 0/3 weapon. Most of the weapons in this set tend to be 0/3s. They don't really want to give a mage an actual weapon. What they want to give you instead is more of a utility. So it's kind of like, in a way I would think of it more like equipping an accessory, like an amulet or something like that. In any case, at the end of your turn, draw 3 cards. So normally, when you pay for a draw effect, it would be like 5 mana, so you're thinking cards like Nourish. Druids, 5 mana, draw 3 cards, or you can use it to gain mana crystals. And sometimes, especially with Jade Druid decks nowadays, you do actually want to take the mana crystals instead of the draw thing. So Nourish is a card that's much more popular now than it used, and it's pretty dang good overall. I mean, it's core in Jade Druid, so, like, enough said. Now, this is 6 mana to draw 3, and then it stays around. On a future turn, if it's still there, you're going to draw another 3. There's a minor drawback in that you can't control this drawing, so you could deck yourself out pretty easily if you were trying to play something like a control deck. So I probably would not put this in a control deck, but what other people have been talking about is using Alanf as a more like a tempo card. So you're getting low on cards, you turn 6, you develop this, you draw 3 cards, and they kind of have to respond to it somehow, because if they don't destroy this, it's going to give you 6 cards value, and possibly 9 cards value. And if you have a lot of cheap mage spells, letting Alanf just kind of seal the deal in that game could become kind of an ultimate value. It doesn't matter how I use my cards anymore, because I have infinite cards kind of deal. So I think Alanf could actually be pretty good. I do imagine, because all of the classes are getting legendary weapons now, things like Oozes and Harrison Jones are going to have a big comeback. But yeah, Alanf on its own, pretty strong card. Just you want to watch for overdrawing. But drawing 3 cards with the potential to draw 6 is pretty dang good. Okay, so next up, Branching Paths. I believe this is the first Choose Twice card in the game, and they've said that Choose Twice does not work with Vanguard Staghelm, which is your choose 1 effects triggered twice. Because this is a choose twice effect, it's not a choose once. So anyway, 4 mana, and you can choose draw a card, give your minions +1 attack, or gain 6 armor. So obviously there's a lot of flexibility in the card. You can play it kind of as a 4 mana Arcane Intellect, draw 2, as a 4 mana Savage Roar, basically +1 attack twice for your minions. You could also use it as gain 12 armor, which is, I would say in most cases, probably slightly better than a greater healing potion, because armor can put you above 30 HP. Though I guess you would probably be using that if you're desperate. Or you can take a half measure. So drawing a card and giving your minions +1 attack in some cases will be better, because you need just 1 extra attack so that your minions can trade, and then drawing a card allows you to get further into your deck. You might need to trade on the board with +1 attack and then gain 6 armor to live if your opponent has some burst after you clear their minions. Overall, I don't think this card is going to be too strong, though, and I did also just notice it's only a minion, so it's weaker than Savage Roar even if you play it like that, because your hero doesn't get the plus attack. So yeah, because although it's very versatile, the effects just aren't very strong. With the exception of putting it into a very defensive deck, I don't think this is going to see a lot of play. Gain 12 armor is pretty decent, honestly, for 4 mana. Actually, I'd say it's really good. But using it for the other effects is kind of weak, so I mean, 4 mana draw 2, I don't know. Glade Portal isn't really played, and that's 6 mana, heal 6, summon a random 6 drop. So I think this is just going to be a little too weak to be played seriously, but I would say it's a decent arena card, and it's worth experimenting with. It's kind of fun. Now, if there's any other synergy with choose twice effects, like maybe every time you choose an effect, this minion does something. That could be interesting, because then this doubles up on something like that. But without knowing if there's another card that actually synergizes with this, doesn't seem strong enough. Okay, so next up, Carnivorous Cube. This is a 5-mana 4/6, one of the first cards they were actually announcing this set. Battlecry destroys a friendly minion, death rattle, summon 2 copies of it. So there's quite a few possibilities for this card where you could make it pretty strong. The only downside is really that it's kind of slow. It's got good stats by itself, though it does require you to destroy a minion, so that's a thing. But if you're building a deck around it, which obviously you're going to, you could do things like Devilsaur Egg, destroy a 0/5 egg, and then summon 2 more eggs. And that will create a 5/5 on the board in addition to your 4/6. And later on, if you can activate the rest of the eggs, you can get 15/15 of Devilsaur over the long haul, plus the 4/6, which is actually a ridiculous amount of value. That's something like, what, 1919, 2020? And that's just one idea. You can also go much greedier than that. You could play Barnes, and then if it summons something like Malygos, you could destroy the Malygos, and then when this dies, you get 2 Malygoses back on the board, and you kind of just win the game. Though you probably get polymorphed, so plays like that where you're trying to double up on a big minion, or take a weakened big minion and then bring it back to full strength, probably not that realistic in practice. But yeah, if you have a good death rattle, destroy it, get the death rattle effect, summon 2 copies of it later on. Over the long game, a really strong card. Only question is, what's going to be the optimal cards to synergize with it? Because there's actually a lot of possibilities out there. I do think this card will see some play. Like, obviously it doesn't fit into every deck, but it creates possibilities that otherwise wouldn't be there. So I think it's a nicely designed card. Definitely going to play around with it. Okay, next up, Cheat Death. So you might notice this is a rogue secret, 2 mana. Whenever a friendly minion dies, return it to your hand, it costs 2 less. So basically, Shadow Step as a secret. Now, Shadow Step is normally a 0-cost spell, so it does feel a little weird to pay 2 mana to Shadow Step it. You could also think of it like as Getaway Kodo, except that you pay an extra mana, and then that minion is going to cost 2 less. Now, this is good in Rogue, because if you happen to have a big minion die, like Malygos, you can bring it back onto the board for 7 mana, and really abuse it. Get like a Sinister Strike and an Eviscerate, and then coin second Sinister Strike in the same turn. Could be good in a deck like that, if Miracle Rogue was ever going to be a thing again. Likewise, Gadget Sand Auctioneer. If your Gadget Sand Auctioneer dies and you get to replay it for 4 mana, that can be really scary, because a 4-mana Gadget Sand Auctioneer is going to draw you a lot of cards. So yeah, they are actually adding rogue secrets into the game, and in this set they said they were going to release 3 secrets total. So the downside of playing rogue secrets is that since they're a new concept, there's only so few of them, that it's going to be pretty easy to predict what's going on. But, I mean, there are certain circumstances where it's like, okay, they know you have a Cheat Death on the board, and you just played Malygos, but there's not really anything they can do about it, because either they kill it, or they just die next turn. And if they kill it, you get to play it again, and, well, do all sorts of spell damage stuff. Of course, Polymorph is a thing. Hex is still a card, even though it got nerfed, so maybe it has some uses. I think you would only play this in a deck that would really benefit from getting an expensive minion out cheaper, and if that happens to occur, then you pretty much win the game. Crushing Walls. So this is a 7-mana Hunter Epic. Destroy your opponent's left and rightmost minions. Pretty expensive for removal, honestly. If you compare it to something like Meteor, which can destroy 3 minions, that costs 6 mana, so it's 15 damage to main target and then 3 damage to the side minions. This is only stronger when your opponent has 2 really big minions out and they happen to be on the left side and the right side, which is a little bit tricky to set up, so this isn't that powerful of a removal. You would probably only try to play a card like this in Control Hunter, and Control Hunter isn't really a thing. I've tried it since like forever, and never really worked out that well. So probably not going to see play, but a good card in Arena, because in Arena it tends to kind of just curve out where your opponent might play a 5-drop and then a 6-drop, and that's 2 decently big minions, and then you 2-for-1 them with this, and they're sad. Okay, next up, the Priest Weapon, if you can even call it a weapon because it's 0 attack. 3 mana, 0/3 Dragon Soul. After you cast 3 spells in a turn, summon a dragon, and it's a 5/5. So if you have a lot of really cheap spells in your deck, then yeah, it's possible to get those dragons out, and you might get 2 dragons, but honestly, having to kind of build a deck that's really targeted at getting this card to work, and then needing to play 3 spells on a following turn to get a 5/5 dragon. So it's going to be like 2 turns for you to get that 5/5 dragon out usually. Not really that great, and your opponent probably is going to be playing Ooze or Harrison in this expansion, so they destroy your 1 weapon, and then you kind of just lost a 3-mana legendary to a 2-mana Ooze for nothing. I think if there's a place for this card, it would be in something like the Razakus Priest, which plays 1 of everything and tends to have a lot of cheap cards that just draw more cards. Though it has to be spells. So, Power Word Shield, Potion of Madness, yeah, that's what it's called. Circle of Healing, cards like that might work well with this, but yeah, unless there's more 1-cost spells that would be really good in decks like that, or maybe a dragon deck, kind of hard to justify putting this in the deck, but it's one of those cards which I think could surprise people. Like, it looks weak right now, but if people actually find a build, there might be one that works with it. And maybe you get 2 5/5 dragons, and that would actually be pretty good. I mean, 1 5/5 dragon for 3 mana isn't bad. That's good stats. So, we'll have to see, but probably not going to see much play, if any. And I'm thinking probably not any, but who knows. Okay, Dry Gulch Jailer. This is a 2 mana, 1/1 Paladin Death Rattle. Add 3 Silverhand Recruits to your hand, and Paladins are getting some more cards that synergize with Silverhand Recruits, but I think the main use for this card is just that it adds extra minions to your hand. So you could play it in Hand Buff Paladin, which isn't really a thing at the moment, but could be. I mean, you add 3 minions to your hand, and then you buff your hand +1/+1, and then you got 3 2/2s in your hand that you can play on the board when you're ready. Actually, filling your hand could be pretty good with cards like Twilight Drake. I don't know if like Twilight Drake Paladin would be a thing. Hand Paladin. Well, I mean, I guess that's kind of what Hand Buff Paladin is, but like a Hand Paladin that actually tries to maintain the big hand rather than just get the buffs out and then flood the board. Who knows? Anyway, I think this is a card which could see some niche applications there. With the amount of mana you actually have to play to get all the Silverhand Recruits out, I don't remember if they're 1 or 2, but either way, that is kind of expensive to basically summon 4 1/1s. Decent card to get off Barnes, though. So I don't know, would you put this in a Death Battle deck, too? Maybe? Yeah, there's possibilities there, but it wouldn't fit into a standard Paladin list, and definitely not much for an aggro jet list, I think. Like, a 1/1 is just too slow, generally. We'll have to see, though. I like the card's design. I will play around with it, but probably not too strong. Like, maybe 2 out of 5 stars. Okay, and then there's this card, Dustbreaker. So, I haven't actually watched anyone's full review on it, but it seems like people are flipping the shit about this card. So it's a 4 mana 3/3 dragon. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage to all other minions. That's really strong. So Consecrate is 4 mana, deal 2 damage to all enemies. This is a 4 mana 3/3 that does 3 damage to all other minions. Now, yeah, that hits your own minions, but you don't really care. As a control priest, you're pretty much only going to have like non-consequential minions on the board, or you're not going to have any minions on the board. So the ability to deal that much damage and develop a 3/3 is really strong. Could easily see this going into pretty much any priest deck that's willing to play a couple dragons. For the time being, Draconid Operative is still a card, so Dragon Priest, for sure you'd want to play it. Razakus Priest, really strong, more board clear. That would be good. I guess you want to play it in Big Priest, because Big Priest only plays big minions, but yeah, it's a really strong card and definitely pushes Priest back towards dragons. And of course, you noticed with the Priest weapon that that also summons dragons, so this might be another kind of Blackrock Mountains for Priest, where Dragon Priest becomes really strong. So yeah, probably the strongest card in the set so far. At least the ones we've reviewed so far. Okay, Pharaoh Gibler, or Gibler. It's a 1 mana 1/1. After this minion attacks a hero, add a copy of it to your hand. I think this is probably pretty weak. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a beast tag, so it's not like Snow Flipper Penguin, where you can just kind of put it into Aggro Druid as a cheap beast to benefit from the +2/+2 draw card. In theory, like if you get it out early and your opponent can't respond to it or doesn't want to because they have more important things to do, you could get a couple 1/1s back into your hand, but that's not really that strong. Like for 1 more mana, the Dry Gulch Jailer that Paladin has guarantees you getting 3 1/1s into your hand that are Silverhand Recruits that also benefit with Silverhand Recruit buffing cards. And this is just kind of a lot weaker than that. It's rare that you're going to get 1 Gibber back in your hand, and it's very, very rare that you're going to get more than that. So I think they're just better cards, even in an aggro deck that might be able to out-tempo your opponent and benefit from getting it on the board early. That's a terrible card. 1 star for sure. Okay, Gather Your Party. 6 mana warrior spell. I think it's actually the most expensive warrior spell that's going to be in standard right now. Kind of sad. Warrior doesn't get a lot of big spells for some reason. Anyway. Oh, no. Actually, that's wrong. There's a 7 mana spell that's coming up later. Okay, Gather Your Party. So you recruit a minion from your deck, and if you don't know already, what recruit means is that it takes a random minion from your deck and it puts it into play. So this is really similar to the Shadow Essence that Priests got with the Frozen Throne expansion, which was a card that was initially being kind of laughed at because it's 6 mana, summon a 5/5 of a 5/5 copy of a random minion in your deck. But Big Priest was actually a pretty good deck, and that card was, well, you play 2 of in Big Priest, so I mean it wasn't actually that bad. Now, obviously, if you had a small card in your deck, getting a 5/5 copy of a small card is better than recruiting like a 1/4 Armor Smith onto the board. But I think with Warrior, there's enough early game spells and weapons that you could just not play any early game minions, and then all of your minions in the deck are top end heavy. Cards like Deathwing or Deathwing Dragonlord. Now, I don't know what would actually make cards like that viable. Again, I don't think this would be enough to just gather your party, get a 12/12 out on the board, and call that good enough to win a game as Warrior. But it's something to think about. Yes, Siraj, while he's still in Standard, will be pretty good with this, actually. Now, what would you put with Yasiraj? I mean, basically the idea is if you were building Big Warrior, kind of like you were playing Big Priest, you would probably play this card, but so far there's not really anything to suggest that Big Warrior would be much of a thing, but you could. Also, worth noting, it does thin your deck, so if you're trying to get to fatigue or basically cycle through your deck as fast as you can, this actually helps you do it a little bit faster. So, interesting. Probably not going to see much play, if any, but it's possible that there could be a new Big Warrior archetype. Okay, next guy. New Shaman Legendary. 6 mana Grumble World Shaker. So it's a 7/7. Return your other minions to your hand. They cost 1. So kind of like, I think it's called like Spirit Essence or something, the Shaman spell, released a couple sets ago, which is 3 mana, give all your minions Death Rattle, return it to your hand. Except it happens instantly, and you can replay them for 1. And replaying minions for 1 allows you to do some pretty ridiculous crap. So, I guess what you could do is... Okay, I keep going back to the Malygos example, but in theory, Barnes, you get Malygos out on turn 10, and then you Grumble, put it back into your hand for 1 mana. Well, actually, if you got Malygos off of Barnes, you would just probably kill them right there. Okay, let's see. What would be a more realistic scenario? You could be playing a Jade Shaman, and you get some of those Battlecry minions that summon Jades, and then you get them back into your hand, and now you can create more Jades for 1 mana. And the turn after you play Grumble, you kind of just flood the board, and it's just too much for almost any deck to handle. Because like if you have a board of like a 7/7 Jade, an 8/8 Jade, a 9/9 Jade, it doesn't matter. Your opponent has Meteor, it's not good enough. Your opponent has Flame Strike, not good enough. So could be a pretty good finisher actually. And you know, it is a 7/7 for 6 mana, which is actually better than average stats. Like the classic 6 mana minion that was just vanilla was Boulderfist Ogre, and that was a 6 mana 6/7. So even if you're not playing an elemental deck, this is better than Boulderfist Ogre. Well, return your other minions to your hand. As long as you're okay with getting your minions back in your hand and them costing 1 mana. But of course, you're going to put this in the deck because you want that. Also could bring Elemental Shaman to be better. It's an elemental. You can discover it off of Servant of Kalamos. Let's see. So there's some pretty good elementals to benefit with this, like the 7 mana Stonebreaker elemental or whatever it's called. It's a 4/4 that summons 2/2/3 taunts when you battle cry it, and this could bring that back to your hand. So it becomes 1 mana, 4/4, summon 2/3 taunts. Could just be good with cards like Fire Elemental or Blaze Caller, being like 1 mana, 6/6, deal 5 damage. Seems really strong. It could easily go in both Jade Shaman, Elemental Shaman, or a Jade Shaman hybrid. Jade Elemental Shaman hybrid. Let's see, would you just put it in like a regular deck though? Like the typical token Shaman that's just being kind of played right now as the better Shaman decks? Yeah, I think you would, because anything you can get back to your hand for 1 mana might become really easy to evolve with. But you still have to have it on the field. Okay, anyway, I think this will be a really strong card. Probably going to see play in, I would think, most Shaman decks will probably try to build around this somehow. Like Doppelganger, for instance, and Token Shaman. You get 3 Doppelgangers back in your hand, and they turn into 9 5-cost minions that you can play for 1 mana. And then you evolve them whenever you draw Evolve, and it's just kind of game over for your opponent. So, yeah, I think this would go in pretty much every Shaman deck. It's really strong. Okay, Gilded Reuter, 5 mana, 2/4, neutral minion. Battlecry, recruit a minion that costs 4 or less, which means, of course, bring it into the field from play. From your deck. Now, is there anything really good that you want to bring in onto the field? I guess if you stuff your deck for 4-drops, it's not bad. Like, you could have a Water Elemental, so it becomes 5 mana, 2/4, summon a 3/6 Water Elemental, and it also thins your deck a bit. Are there any decks where you would want to play 4-drops and Guild Recruiter, but not 1/2/3s? Maybe Control Warrior? Like, I don't think you would put it in the same deck as the Recruit and Adventurer, or whatever that card was called, but you could use this to take all the cheap minions out of your deck before you play the Recruit to get the big minions out of your deck, just for instance. I don't know. The RNG kind of makes it hard to build around. Do you really want to sacrifice having that many early game minions for the sake of putting in cards that would be specifically good with this? So you'd have like 4 4-drops. Maybe. If you were playing Wild Mode, you might play it to get Tomb Pillager out as like a Miracle Rogue. And you just don't play Van Cleef or cards like Razor Leaf Flasher or whatever. I think there'll be some experimentation with this card, and it might be good, but it really depends on what card you would bring to synergize with it. I'm going to say that this card will probably see play in a couple decks, because it can be good, potentially. The only problem is you have to build your deck around it. I kind of see it in the same lines as something like Inkmaster Solia, where, okay, sure, if you're playing the Kazakus Mage and you're willing to put 1 copy of everything in your deck, and then you're going to Inkmaster Solia to do a 10-mana Pyroblast for free, sure. But yeah, only in niche decks like that. Okay, next up, Jasper Spellstone. So they have these new Spellstones in the set, which are cards that upgrade as you do something. So this card, you gain 3 armor, and it upgrades into deal 4 damage to a minion. It starts as 1 mana, deal 2 damage, which is fine. Becomes 1 mana deal 4 damage, and if you gain 3 more armor on top of that, it becomes 1 mana deal 6 damage, which is actually really cheap removal. Worth noting that that would be good with cards like Gadgetzan Auctioneer. I mean, cheap spells always are. I think this is a card that definitely is good enough to see some play. It's just a question of, are you going to be playing a control deck that can fit it in? Because you do have to gain the armor for it to be really good. You probably wouldn't play it in aggro, of course. Just not strong enough for that. But if you're playing some of the armor gain stuff, it can become pretty easy to make this a really powerful spell. Also worth mentioning, kind of worth mentioning, I keep going back to the whole Malygos example, but yeah, you can play it on turn 10 with a Malygos and make it do 7 damage to a minion, or if it's upgraded, 11 damage to a minion. Which kind of puts it in the same power level as like Arcane Blast plus Malygos. Arcane Blast, if you don't know, it was a spell. It was a 1 mana mage spell that doubled the spell damage on it, so plus 10 instead of plus 5. But it still could only target minions. So, yeah, it's pretty strong. But Jade Druid is a deck, I think, right now that is pretty tight on its cards. I don't think there's like a lot of really weak cards in that deck. So, what are you going to take out to put this in? But it's probably in the top 40 cards, or, well, I guess like top 20, because you put 15 copies of, oh my god, you put 2 copies of each of 15 cards into your deck. What am I talking about? Yeah, and if there somehow is a better control archetype than Jade Druid, which I kind of doubt, then you could put it in. Big Druid. Like, how about Big Druid? Because Big Druid plays that 1 mana card that gives +1/+1 to a minion and then gain armor equal to its attack value. That would be really good with Jasper Spell as a cheap way to remove minions as you grow into those big endgame Yasiraj, etc. kind of turns. It could be good in that deck. Katharina Winterwisp. So this is a 8 mana Hunter Legendary. Battle Cry, Recruit a Beast. Death Rattle, Recruit a Beast. 8 mana 6/6. Its power level is going to depend on how high your curve is. So if you have cards like King Crush in your deck, which probably isn't going to happen, or Savannah Highmane as your beasts, this becomes really strong because it's like a 8 mana 6/6. Put a 6/5 Death Rattle, summon 2/2s. 2/2/2s into the field. But on the other hand, if you try to play Hunter normally and you have a bunch of like 1/1 alley cats, then this would actually end up being pretty terrible. So this card kind of supports a more of a control Hunter archetype, or at least one that doesn't try to go beast heavy, but rather has a few beasts. And then the early game minions are filled with something like Stitched Tracker, which is a 3 mana 2/2, not a beast, discovers a minion from your deck. It's a value card. It's good for the long game. I guess it's possible you can get enough value to win the game as a hunter like this. And Recruit is a lot better than just adding a big minion to your hand because you can maintain board tempo or at least catch back up. The only question is, how are you going to survive as a hunter? And probably not going to happen. So I don't think this card is actually going to see much play, honestly. Because if it was going to, then the Abomination card, what was it called? Stitched Abomination? 7 mana, 6/7 Hunter Epic, which Death Rattled summoned a beast that died that game. That card wasn't played at all. It was pretty terrible, actually. So I don't know how this is going to be enough. I guess it's a Death Rattle minion, so you can get it back with N'Zoth. That's worth mentioning. So if it was like a late game N'Zoth Hunter, maybe you could make Control Hunter work. It's not totally out of the question. It's either Control Hunter or nothing, though, because most hunters want to play the early game minions because Hunter is aggressive. So probably not going to see play. Cobalt Illusionist, 4 mana, 3/3, summon a 1/1 copy of a minion from your hand. So there's 2 ideas I have with this card. One is you're trying to cheat out a minion that has really good card effects onto the field. So you might put it with Gadgetzan Auctioneer or Malygos, and I know I keep mentioning the whole miracle idea, but that would actually be pretty good. So if they don't kill it, and then you destroy it on your turn, so you get a 1/1 copy of Malygos or Gadgetzan Auctioneer onto the field, on that turn, you would pretty much win the game. And I guess the advantage over Barnes is you have more control over it. So A, that's a minion from your hand, less random. B, if you destroy it on your turn, you have full mana to spend still. So yeah, it's a pretty big threat. And I think if you do put it in your deck, people are kind of obligated to kill it so that whatever comes out of it is destroyed that turn. Which would also mean if you have cards like Can Bloodhurf or the Twilight Summoner, 4 mana 1/1 Death Rattle, summon a 5/5 in your hand, then this would be a really good card to make it so your board's impossible to remove. So it becomes a 4 mana 3/3 Death Rattles into a 1/1 that Death Rattles into a 5/5, and then you bring everything back with Mizoth in the late game. Not too bad. Honestly, I kind of like the idea of the Gadget Stand Auctioneer Malygos, like cheat a big minion out onto the field and then win the game because it's unfair. A little bit better, but in the last set, they added a card that pretty much no one really experimented with, except for me, of course, called Roll the Bones, which was a 2 mana rogue spell. Draw a card. If it's a Death Rattle minion, draw another card. So if you played a deck which was almost entirely Death Rattles, you can draw 5 Death Rattles or more. You could just play pure Death Rattles and then draw to 10 cards. And then I think what happens is you mill one, but you don't draw after that because it didn't actually enter your hand. So put this in a Death Rattle Rogue deck, just becomes really hard to deal with. Could argue make that like a Jade Rogue because Black Paw is Jade and a Death Rattle. And so is the 2 mana 1/1 that Death Rattles into a Jade Golem. Could be pretty decent, but I think overall I would kind of like the just play a pretty much pure Death Rattle minion deck a little bit better. Is there any world where you can play a deck without spells and just rely on Death Rattle synergy like that? Probably not, but I think this would be a good addition to a meme deck like that. I think it will see some experimentation with, though, seriously, with cards that you really want to cheat out from your hands. So, aka basically Malygos, or Gadget Stand Auctioneer and stuff of that nature. So, could be a pretty strong card going forward. I think there were times when those kind of decks did play Barnes, but this is a bit more consistent than Barnes. Also, can be brought back with Mizoth, so that's still worth mentioning. Probably about a 2-3 star card. Like, some people will try it in their decks and it might end up being really good. Okay, level up. So this is 5 mana, give your Silverhand recruits +2/+2 and taunt. So the question that makes this card good or bad is, do they have to be on the field? So if it is field and hand, or give your Silverhand recruits +2/+2. It doesn't say if it's hand, field, or if it's for the rest of the game. No, there's no way it could be the rest of the game, right? Okay, so let's assume it's on the field, right? Then it becomes a bad Quartermaster. And Quartermaster was a 5 mana paladin minion, 2/5 that gives your Silverhand recruits +2/+2. You would never justify dropping a 2/5 body just to give them taunt as well. That's not important. So if it's like that, this card is absolutely terrible. If it includes Silverhand recruits in your hand, then it becomes a good reason to use Dry Gulch Jailer, because you can get a bunch of like 1 or 2 mana 3/3s. I think they're 1 mana when they're from your hand. So 1 mana 3/3s, and they also buff the ones that happen to be on the board. And if that was the case, it could also be good in Wild, where you just try to make a super Silverhand recruit deck where you play both Quartermaster and Silverhand recruits and maybe just a card Trueheart and crazy shit like that. Now, if it's for the rest of the game, which I don't think it is, and it would say if it was, so I'm 99% sure it isn't, then this card would be absolutely broken. So in practice, I want to see if it affects hand or not. If it affects hand, I think that this could make a Silverhand Recruit archetype be pretty decent if there's extra cards to support it. So, could see some play. But then again, could end up just being kind of like hand buff Paladin, where it was like, it kind of works, but it's not as good as just like Murloc Aggro, for instance. Now, if this card only buffs minions on the field, it's absolute trash once again. So it really depends there. Okay, Lone Champion. This is a really sweet card. 3 mana, 2/4. If you control no other minions, gain Taunt and Divine Shield. Now, 3 mana, 2/4 Taunt Divine Shield is a really strongly statted minion. It's kind of like playing the 4 mana 3/4 that gains Divine Shield and Taunt if you played an Elemental last turn, except it doesn't break your Elemental chain, and you don't need to be playing an Elemental deck. So this can just go in any control deck that's going to play very few minions in the early game. So things like Control Warrior, in addition to having a couple weapons. And maybe it wouldn't be Control Warrior because you don't want the Whirlwind effects to take out the Divine Shield, but I still think it would be a decent choice. It's kind of like a better Tar Creeper, because the Divine Shield can often be really annoying, and it also, I guess the fact that it has 2 attack in your own turn doesn't matter that much, but yeah, Divine Shield is probably better than 1 extra health against most classes. So it becomes really annoying to deal with. And what you're looking for playing a control minion is just trying to stall till the late game. So this will protect your health for a while, and that's exactly what you want. So things like Rizaka's Priest probably would play this. Control Warrior might play it. Let's see, what other control decks are out there right now? Control Hunter, why the hell not? Yeah, this would be good in Control Hunter, I think, if Control Hunter was a thing. So yeah, we'll have to see going forward. It definitely helps against aggro decks. Then again, so would Tar Creeper have, but aggro Druid ended up being really, really strong. Okay, so Marin the Fox, the one card that everybody's had a chance to play with so far. It's a 8 mana 6/6 summon 0/8 treasure chest for your opponent. Don't want to comment too much on the card because we kind of already know this card is overall pretty bad. It's slow. Spending 8 damage to destroy a treasure chest is actually kind of a pain. You can do some interesting tricks with Crazed Alchemist, flipping it around. You could also flipping the stats to instantly kill it, so it becomes like 2 mana 2/2 destroy a 0/8 chest. Or you can play Moat Lurker, which in theory will get you an extra chest back when the Moat Lurker dies because it resummons the minion. So that means 2 legendary treasures. But overall, it's kind of too slow. I like the fact that it's a 6/6, so like if you weren't playing that many minions, your opponent's going to hold on to the big removals, but if a 6/6 is kind of your top end, then you don't really want to invest more mana in like a 12/12. But yeah, it's too slow. If you put this in your deck, most aggro or tempo decks are just going to force you to deal with their board, and playing this card will make you lose games more often than it will make you win games in those matchups. Yeah, it's a pretty decent card to have in control versus control, but then again, so is Elise Trailblazer. And I think Elise Trailblazer is still better than Marin. The treasures aren't that amazing, and putting in your deck to get a 2 mana, add 5 cards to your hand. That's also a 5 mana 5/5 instead of an 8 mana 6/6, and requires no destroying a treasure chest. Just seems better overall. So not a very strong card. Okay, so this is the most expensive warrior spell at the moment. Ties for Crush in wild mode, but no one plays Crush, and probably no one even remembers that card. So anyway, in standard, it's 7 mana, summon a 5/5 Mithril Golem. If you equip a weapon I think it's while it's in your hand. Actually, does it have to be in your hand? I'm not sure about that. But anyway, if you equip a weapon, it becomes summon 2 5/5s. If you equip 2 weapons, it becomes summon 3 5/5s. 7 mana, summon 3 5/5s is pretty strong. Kind of feels a little bit like Jade Druid there for me. 3 5/5s, probably enough to push most games to their conclusion, especially if you play 2 of these back to back. So if you can justify putting more weapons into your warrior deck, then this becomes really good. The problem is, the best warrior weapon, Fiery War Axe, got nerfed, so it's now a 3 mana 3/2 weapon, and not really seeing much play, especially in control. So you would need some good weapons to replace that, and yeah, you can still play Blood Razor, which is good, and in Wild you can play stuff like Death's Bite, but yeah, you kind of have to be playing a few more weapons in the deck, but I think this will be pretty good. I don't think Blizzard would just release the set that requires you to equip weapons and then have no good weapons. Maybe you could play Gorehowl again, but would you want to play Gorehowl over just playing Scourge Lord Garrosh? I don't think so. So yeah, we'll have to see. Really depends on its viability for what the new weapon or weapons released in the set are going to be, and hopefully we'll see something good. But yeah, overall, if you can upgrade it, it becomes pretty strong. Okay, so next up, Raven Familiar. 2 mana, 2/2. Battlecry, reveal a spell on each deck. If yours costs more, draw it. So a 2 mana, 2/2 is pretty weak. A 2 mana, 2/2 draw card is good. But this is going back to the Joust mechanics of, what was that set? The Grand Tournament, which for the most part were not good enough to really see competitive play. Obviously, it's a Raven, so it's hinting at, oh, this goes with Medivh. And Medivh's weapon, at Yash, is really good when you play big spells like Pyroblast, because it summons a 10 mana minion. So yeah, if you're playing the greediest mage deck of all time, like Big Mage, I guess you could put this in the deck, but in general, I think it's not good enough. Because you have the Secret Keeper card, which is a 2 mana, 2/3, draw a secret from your deck, guaranteed. This is only if you win the Joust, and it has 1 less health. I guess it's a beast, so you can use it with Curator, but probably not going to see any real play. If Big Spells Mage is somehow a thing, then I guess. I mean, it's not that bad in Control Mage, because you have Meteor, you have Flame Strike, you have Blizzard, and those cards are really good in Control Mage. They're also some of the most expensive spells in the game, so maybe you can make yourself win the Joust like 70% of the time. Okay, if you're playing a Control Mage, maybe this is good enough. But then you low roll on the secrets, and you only win some of the time. A 3 mana spell probably isn't good enough to win the Joust a lot. So, yeah, if you're playing like a Frostlich Jaina deck with Medivh, then yeah, maybe. But overall, Secret Keeper is better, just period. But maybe this is a decent filler, like as the 26th or 28th card to consider in your deck. And by that, I mean, of course, you usually play 2 copies, so like in the 26, 27, or 28, 29 slot. Okay, so next up, Rin the First Disciple. She's a lot older than I remember looking at. Yeah, let's just zoom in on these cards a bit. So 6 mana, 3/6 taunt. That's not so bad. Warlocks are always desperate for taunts. When it dies, if it dies, it adds the first seal to your hand. So the seals, they are 5 mana spells. They start at summon a 2/2 demon to the field, and it increases to summon a 3/3 demon to the field, and then a 4/4 demon to the field, and then a 5/5 demon to the field. And I think after you've spent like 5 seals plus this card, you get 10 mana. I forget the stats on it, like a 10 mana 10/10 destroy your opponent's deck. So it's basically, if you are playing a slow enough game where you can get this huge demon into your hand by playing 31 mana to get it into your hand and then 10 mana more to play it, while playing these really bad cards. 6 mana 3/6 taunt is not good. A 5 mana 2/2 demon is atrociously bad. Then yeah, you can destroy your opponent's deck. So this is the counter to Dead Man's Warrior, I guess, which is a deck very, very few people play. But it would be a way for a Warlock to win the fatigue game against pretty much anything. So I guess you get those cards out, you win versus Jade Druid because you destroy this deck. Oh wait, that's only assuming that the Jade Idol is in the deck though. But it would beat Dead Man's Hand Warrior, assuming that at least one of the Dead Man's Hands is in the deck. And it would be Archbishop Benedictus Priest, which isn't a thing, by the way, because your opponent copies your deck, but then you just destroy it, so it doesn't matter that they add 20 cards to your deck, or their deck. Yeah, it's probably not going to see play, honestly, but I can't imagine a world where the metagame slows that down so much that you would actually consider paying 31 mana of terrible cards to get a 10 mana 10/10 and then play a 10 mana 10/10 and not be dead by them. It's just not going to happen. Really terrible card, but fun. If I got it, I would try it and then just lose and fall to rank 20. So, was that the last card so far? Hold on. Okay, let's check Hearthbound real quick. That might have been the last card. No, that's not right. Okay. Still more cards. Jeez. Okay, so we'll probably go a little faster on these. Rummaging Cobalt, it's a 3-mana 1/3. Return a destroyed weapon to your hand. So this is probably only good in weapon classes, because I don't think you're going to put this in the decks that only have the legendary class cards like Priest, just to get back the 3-mana Dragon Soul card. But if you're playing Control Warrior, and for some reason you want a lot of weapons, then this actually becomes decent, because okay, if you compare it to like Acolyte of Pain, same stats, and you kind of get to selectively draw a card that you really want, which is a weapon. But it's hard to justify then, because sometimes you can draw 2 cards off of Acolyte of Pain, which is just better. Maybe you would only put this in the decks where you actually want to replay that one legendary weapon. Or maybe you play like a Medivh plus legendary weapon deck so that you can always get one of those 2 back. Who knows? I don't think there's anything broken enough that you would be like, man, I really want a second copy of those. I guess Shadowmourne from Scourge Lord Garrosh if you're a warrior. But then you might accidentally get one of the lesser weapons that you don't actually want in the late game. Probably not going to see play, but it is kind of there as an out there card if you really do need that weapon again. Okay, Sapphire Spellstone. Summon 1 copy of a friendly minion. Overload 3 mana crystals to upgrade. So 7 mana, and when it upgrades, it becomes 2 copies and then 3 copies. So if you can upgrade it to 3 copies and you have a big minion on the board, like let's say Ragnaros the Fire Lord in Wild or Alakir the Wind Lord in Standard. Let's see, what else would be really big? I don't know, Deathwing Dragon Lord. Then you can make 3 copies of a huge minion and basically win the game. So you could play a Overload Shaman. I mean, there's actually quite a few cards to support that archetype. It just hasn't been good enough. It didn't really have much of a finisher, but this could be the finisher. So like 3 copies of Alakir or something like that would pretty much win the game. I mean, that would be like 18 charge damage. So this is a card to watch out for, I think. It does require you to play quite a bit of Overload, but I don't think that's too out of the question for Shamans. So I think there'll be some experimentation with the Overload archetype, and if it works, this will be a key card in that deck for sure. Okay, Seeping Oozling. 6 mana, Battlecry, gain the death rattle of a random minion in your deck. It's a 5/4 minion for 6 mana. I don't think there are any death rattles in the game that are really good enough that you would put a 5/4 that randomly copies the death rattle into your deck. The only exception I could think is if you have like 1 or 2 death rattle minions in the game in your deck, and they're really, really strong. Like I don't know, Death Lord, Dragon Lord, Deathwing Dragon Lord. So it's the 12 mana, 12/12, 10 mana, 12/12. Summon all dragons from your hand to your field. But Dragon Hunter, really? I don't think so. So yeah, I mean, if there's something ridiculous like that, like summon all dragons from your hand to your field, then maybe you could play this. But putting that aside, it's probably just way too weak, and I don't think it's going to see any serious play. But I do get that they're trying to hint at pushing, Control Hunter archetype, putting in these slower minions that you would never put in an aggressive hunter. So I like the direction, but I think it's going to fall flat on its face because it always does. Okay, next up, Silver Vanguard. So this is a death rattle that would be pretty good with that Seeping Oozling, now that I think about it. Anyway, Silver Vanguard. 7 mana, 3/3, death rattle, recruit an 8-cost minion. So this is one of those cards which obviously you have to build your whole deck around. You probably want at least 2 or 3 8-cost minions in your deck that aren't Battlecry related. So cards like Tyrian Forging. Let's see, what are other good 8-cost minions? Surely there are some that aren't in Wild right now, right? 8-cost, 8-cost, 8-cost. Yeah, anyway, if there's something like in the realms of like Archmage Antonidas, where sneaking it out onto the field becomes really strong, because it allows you to combo with the mana in your hand, then that could actually be pretty okay. By itself, it's not a super strong card. Well, I mean, by itself, it's terrible, but you have to combine it with some very specific cards. So maybe that deck could be a thing. it's either there's a deck where playing this and then cheating that minion out of your deck just wins you the game, and then you would play Silver Vanguard, or that's not a thing and you would never play it, and it's just a really bad minion to evolve your shaman minions into. Which will be a thing. I mean, shamans probably are going to kind of dread getting this as a 7-drop when they evolve their minions. I think this is a card I'm going to try. I don't know which minion I would combo it with right now, because it's not 7, so you can't do Archmage Antonidas, and it's not a 9-cost minion, so you can't do Malygos or Ysera. But you could do Tyrian Forging with it. You could do Garrosh Hellscream with it. Or, wait, do I mean Garrosh or do I mean Grommash? Garrosh's dad, I think. In any case, it's a card that looks really bad on, like, initial paper, because it's really, really slow. But I think that there's a possibility that this card could see play. So, we'll see. I will experiment with it, because I think that the concept is cool. Obviously, yeah, if you can copy or double up on the Death Rattle, like maybe you play this with the Ooze, the 5-mana corrupting Ooze that destroys a minion, and then as a Death Rattle brings 2 copies of it back. That would be crazy, because then you could summon 3 8-cost minions from your deck, and that would just be like, wow. I mean, who knows? Maybe that is the combo. Maybe you just put 3 Tyrian-like cards like Tyrian, Ragnaros Lightlord, and something else in your deck. You destroy this, and then you bring multiple copies of it back, and you get it destroyed again, and then you just get all those minions for free. Yeah, probably going to be too hard to fit in most cases, though. I mean, the 7-mana 3/3 is really slow, weak to poly. Well, most big minions are, so. Kind of cool, though. So, Spiteful Summoner. Let's see. Battlecry, reveal a spell from your deck, summon a random minion with the same cost. So, as a 6-mana 4/4, if you are playing some really huge spells, like that Medivh mage I was talking about earlier, where you kind of joust, and if you have the bigger spell, you draw it, maybe you would play a huge costed mage deck, where like all your spells are just like 10 mana somehow. But that just doesn't make any sense, because you need the early game spells like Ice Block, Frost Bolt, and maybe Frost Nova in order to get to the late game. So it just doesn't make sense. But possibly with like Druid, because Druid has Ultimate Infestation. So you would reveal an Ultimate Infestation and then summon a random 10-cost minion for 6 mana, and you get a 4/4. So it's really RNG heavy, because sometimes you just end up getting a really weak spell like a Wild Growth, and then it's like a 6-mana 4/4 summon a 2/2, which is pretty bad. Yeah, I guess if you can guarantee the high rolls, then there's some potential, but that's about it. Okay, the next rogue secret, Sudden Betrayal. When a minion attacks your hero, when a minion attacks your hero, instead it attacks one of its neighbors, which would mean the minions next to it on its side of the board. So it's kind of like Misdirection, except a little bit more specific, because it would be the neighboring minions, not a random target. So it's better than Misdirection, actually. And yeah, if you can trick your opponent into... Sometimes you would 2-for-1 with this card, and sometimes you would just heal a bit. Oh, actually, that's worth mentioning. This prevents damage from hitting you as the rogue. So in a control rogue, that's not too bad. Yeah, anyway, it's going to hit one of their minions. If you're really lucky, then you will get a 2-for-1. If not, one of those minions will probably die. So 2 mana, destroy a minion, kind of reactively without having to spend mana that turn. Like, you can set it up in advance. That seems pretty good. So, I mean, these rogue secrets aren't too bad so far. It's kind of dependent on how good the third one is, but rogues playing secrets could be possible. Could be possible. I think this is a pretty well-balanced card, pretty decent. I think it's very possible this could see some play, but only if the other secrets are good enough that it wouldn't be so obvious that you played Sudden Betrayal. Okay, Shaman Weapon, the new Shaman Legendary Weapon. 8 mana, 3/3. After your hero attacks, discover a spell and cast it with random targets. So, that's a pretty damn big weapon. So shaman spells, a lot of them are kind of on the weaker side, with the exception of that new 7 mana spell that requires you to get overload in order to make it create duplicates. Now I don't know, like, is it once you've spent 6 overload or you've gotten 6 overload for the rest of the game, those Sapphire Spellstones are just going to be duplicate a minion 3 times. In which case, this would be crazy if you could actually get it there, because I think it's friendly minions only. If not, I think it becomes a lot less good. It's less good with Shaman. I think if this card was in Mage, it would be insane because, well, A, mages don't really have a weapon that they can use, and B, their spells tend to be bigger. Also, it's random targets, so that's not so great. Like, you could end up hexing your own guy. It's kind of hard to know if this card's going to be good or not. I think the randomness is going to kill it. Like, this random spell minions in the game, like the kind of the old ones. It's like a 5 mana 5/4 that's casts a random 5 or less costing spell, and sometimes it could like fireball the opponent, and then it's like, wow, you just got a 4 mana spell for free. But other times it just kills your own shit, and you're really sad. So because of that, I think it's not going to be that amazing, but it is worth mentioning that it comes with a 3/3 power, so you actually do use this to attack too. And you can get it back with that Rummaging Pillager, the guy that brings back weapons and adds it to your hand. I don't think a Shaman deck is actually going to play this and be competitive, though. I think there's just better options, so probably not played. Next up, Twig of the World Tree. 4 mana, 1/5 weapon, death rattle, gain 10 mana crystals. So I thought about like how it would be if you could actually ramp up with this, but it has 5 durability, so it's going to be really hard to actually break this early on, unless you have like a card that destroys the weapons of both players, which there are none at the moment. I guess if you replaced it with like a different weapon, then that would actually cause the death rattle to trigger, but what other weapons are you going to use it on? Medivh? Nah. So I just think of this as gain 10 extra mana crystals in a turn. So if you think of it that way, then it's like 4 mana, kind of whack somebody for a few turns, and when you're ready, you have it set up as a 1/1, and then you do your ultimate turn where you just spend 20 mana and you just kind of instantly win within a ridiculous board, like all the Jade cards, or Ultimate Infestation plus Kun the Forgotten King plus another 10 drop or something like that. Yeah. So I think this weapon's better. I don't know exactly what you would play it with. Maybe a big druid, but if you can find a place for this deck and a really high-costed druid deck, something like Jade Druid, then I could see this being pretty valuable. And I think this would be a card you definitely would want to get back with the Pillager Cobalt, because that kind of becomes mana gain. So it becomes a 3 mana 1/3 that gets you back a 4 mana weapon, and that 4 mana weapon generates 10 mana crystals. But the problem is it's so hard to break a second time. Nah, that won't be a thing. But you might just put this card in the deck. You wouldn't put the Cobalt in the deck too. I'm trying to make the Cobalt work, but I don't think so. So yeah, seems solid in late game Druid decks, because gaining 10 mana crystals in a turn is never a bad thing, and you only have to pay 4 mana up front. Plus, you can hero power and start hitting things for 2 damage. That's actually, worth mentioning. 2 damage with the weapon might be enough for you to kill minions that you otherwise wouldn't have. Or you could go into Death Knight Malfurion, and then you can start hitting things for 4 damage, which is actually quite a lot. Okay, Unidentified Elixir. This is a 3 mana priest spell. Give a minion +2/+2, gains a bonus effect if it's in your hands. So you don't know what this card's going to be until you actually draw it. The 4 effects are like +2/+2 and lifesteal, +2/+2 and divine shield, +2/+2. I think it's like +2/+2 and taunt. and one other one, which is like Death Rattle, return it to your hand. Anyway, if you actually go look at the elixirs themselves, none of them are really that impressive, so I think this is going to be a card that's just completely not played and constructed. But I guess you would draft it sometimes in Arena as a mediocre card. But yeah, +2/+2 is just not enough stats, and getting something like Lifesteal on top of that, it's not good enough to make this good. Plus the randomness kills it. You can't really play around it as the player who has this in your deck. So I don't expect this will see any play. Unidentified Maul. So this is 3 mana, 2/2 weapon. It's a paladin weapon. And most of the effects are like give your minions something. So it's like give all your minions Divine Shield, summon 2 1/1 Silverhand Recruits, give your minions Taunt, and then there's one other one. I think that this is actually much better than the +2/+2 elixir because A, it's a weapon, you get to swing it twice and remove minions. B, the effects are just better. Giving all your minions Divine Shield, that's actually a pretty strong effect. A 3 mana 2/2 weapon that summons 2 1/1s. That kind of is a throwback to what was the card called? Muster for Battle, which summoned 3 1/1s and equipped a 1/4 weapon. Obviously not quite as good, but not too far behind, and Muster for Battle was seriously busted when it was still playable. So I think that this card will see some play. I don't know exactly if it would be in an aggro deck, because you could also put it in more of a mid-range control deck, because give all your minions Taunt isn't bad. Give all your minions Taunt could mean that you have a big minion and you need it to block some damage, or you have a couple minions and you're trying to survive. So kind of in those circumstances, getting the Taunt effect could be pretty decent. And the Taunt would actually be pretty bad for aggro, so I don't know. But yeah, if you think of Fiery War Axe now as a 3 mana 3/2 weapon, which is almost actually playable, dropping the attack by 1 isn't too bad to get those extra effects. So probably we'll see a little bit of play. I don't think it'll go in that many decks though. The randomness does hurt it a lot. And Shadow Blade, which is the rogue weapon, 3 mana 3/2. Battle Cry, your hero is immune this turn, probably a little better than this, and that saw some limited play. Paladins also have True Silver Champion to compete with us, which is worth mentioning. Overall, I think it's a decent option, and you would draft it in Arena for sure. Okay, Wandering Monster, it's a new Hunter secret, so whenever your enemy attacks your hero, summon a 3-cost minion as the new target. So it protects you as the hunter, you don't take the damage, and maybe it kills their minion off. Also allows you to preemptively set things up without committing too many minions to the board and getting AoE'd. If you were going to be playing a control hunter, this isn't too bad to consider, because it's going to reduce the incoming damage. It's actually likely going to kill the attacking minion. And stat-wise or power-wise, it's actually not too bad. Also, it allows you to fill your early game turns out if you are trying to avoid putting early game beasts in your deck, so you can play something like the Windrunner chick. So yeah, probably a card that we'll see some experimentation with. Might be good enough in just general hunter decks. I don't know if you would make something like a Professor Putricide hunter. I mean, it does require your opponents to actually attack your hero, so it's much better in control where you're playing slower, you're on the defensive, and you expect your opponents to attack you. Otherwise, you'd probably just play Explosive Trap. Okay, Zola the Gorgon, and I think this is finally the last minion up to this point. Yep. Battlecry, choose a friendly minion, add a golden copy of it to your hand. The golden kind of irrelevant other than the sake of coolness, but 3 mana 2/2. Obviously this is an extreme value card, so if you do go to turns 8 or 9 and a big minion sticks to the board on your side of the field, you get a copy of it. That's really good. Kind of comparable to something like at least the Trailblazer in that regard, except faster than that, because the big minion you can play that turn, or you can play in a following turn if it's more than 7 mana. Is it going to see play? It kind of depends on how important it is to duplicate the targets. Like, if you're playing a big deck, would you rather put Zola the Gorgon in so you can copy a second Lich King? Or would you rather just put Lich King and Ysera in the same deck or something like that? I guess an advantage is you can play earlier if you have to as a weaker minion, and maybe you just duplicate an average minion, like 3-mana, 3/4, and then it's kind of like just like a 3-mana, 2/2 draw card, which isn't that bad. Do I think it's going to be good enough to play? I think it's okay, but I don't think it's actually going to be competitive, especially at the moment. And the main problem right now is that there are so many sets in Standard that the cards have to be really good. And I think in a lot of cases you would just put another Legendary into your minion rather than trying to duplicate the same one. And unless it's really important that you duplicate that specific minion. One exception would be like a N'Zoth deck, where you get another N'Zoth in your hand, and that's way better than just getting another random Legendary. Or Cthulhu, or something like that. But you have to keep in mind that a lot of times when you're playing those control decks, and like you play a N'Zoth, like let's say Death Rattle Warrior, the N'Zoth can't really be guaranteed to live. In which case you could just copy an average minion if like the ideal situation doesn't happen. It might see some play in very specific cases like that. I think I would try to play it in N'Zoth Warrior. Might be a better option than like Dead Man's Hand, because it's a little bit faster. You get the N'Zoth back a lot quicker. But we'll have to see. Experimentation. So that was a really, really long card review, guys. So if you're still here, thank you for listening. And yeah, I think this is going to be a pretty fun set. Hopefully Jade Druid doesn't just, kind of be the best the best control Druid deck again. Hopefully there's going to be some opportunities for the meta to be broken up a little bit. Some pretty cool cards. I think I'm starting to like the recruit concept more and more. So we go back to like that seemingly terrible card, the Silver Vanguard. But if you kind of think of how a recruit works and how you could construct a deck around it, it is plausible you could make something like this work. And I think it'll be fun to try, even if it makes me rank 20. So thanks for watching. I've been Dark Skeleton, and I will see you guys in my future video content.